Welcome to IVF This, episode 31, Negativity Bias. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. I'm a mother to two beautiful and feral boys. I'm married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to the podcast today. I'm so happy you have joined me and that we get to talk today. Well, I get to talk, although I do one day hope to actually talk to all of my listeners. It has always been my hope that having a conversation with each one of you. So I do kind of think of these episodes as a way of doing that, like our own little chat, even though I kind of dominate the conversation. As I mentioned in the last episode, I am doing a little bit of a project to help continue to grow this podcast organically. I have little postcards printed up with the podcast art and a QR code that people can scan that will take them to my website's podcast page, and they can choose their preferred platform to listen to any episode. I've started sharing them around town, around Austin, where I live, to some of the fertility clinics. But if you all, my amazing listeners, would like to be a part of that too, shoot me an email at hello@ivfthiscoaching.com. I can send you a few dozen to lay out in your clinic as well. I'll also throw in a Starbucks, I am a TikTok fan, a Starbucks gift card to buy you a cup of coffee for your trouble. But I think it's a fun little way for us to spread the word about this podcast and to continue growing the community around it. So for this week, I want to share a little story that happened at our house a couple of weeks ago because it ties in so beautifully with this week's particular topic. So my oldest son, he is 6, he'll be 7 in August, recently graduated from kindergarten. His school actually got to have a ceremony and it was super adorable watching them sing a few songs and watching this little tiny human walk across the stage and graduate kindergarten. It was wonderful. The day of his graduation was a super fun day. They had a class party in the morning. It was like a rodeo theme because, we live in Texas. And they played little games and won prizes, and parents got to be there. We got to have lunch with them, and then they got to leave school early. So he and I hung out at school, and then after that, we actually went shopping for some new clothes because this child refuses to slow down on growing up. We had lunch together, then we came home. I did some work while he played on the iPad, and then Dad and little brother came home. We got ready, and we all went to the graduation. He had an absolute blast. By all accounts, a perfect day, right? Oh, and I forgot to mention that before his graduation ceremony, he got to pick out dinner and he wanted ice cream for dinner. So we all ate ice cream for dinner. Super fun, a spectacular day. Now, when we came home, it was a pretty mad dash flurry to get everyone to bed. We got home right around the time my 3-year-old goes to bed, and my oldest is only about 30 minutes behind that. So we're brushing teeth, we're changing clothes, we're doing all the things. While I was in the bathroom helping my 3-year-old brush his teeth, my oldest walks in and says, "Mommy, there's something wrong with Yoshi." So now I want to introduce you to the supporting cast of this story, Bowser and Yoshi. Bowser is this beautiful betta fish that my oldest saved up for 3 months to get. He got the fish, the tank, the food, the decorations, everything. So we've had him for a few months now. About a month after we got Bowser, the betta fish, I decided that Bowser needed a little friend. You probably know, or you may know, that bettas, particularly males, aren't like super friendly and they can actually be very aggressive with other animals. But there are some aquatic creatures that can share a tank with betta fish, and one of those is an African dwarf frog. Enter Yoshi. So back to the scene. My oldest walks in and says something is wrong with Yoshi. He's just kind of laying there. So I get my 3-year-old finished up and I tell them to go see their dad, who is in our bedroom. And I go to my son's room and I look at the tank, and sure enough, that tiny little frog is belly up at the bottom of the tank. Let's sigh. Poor dude. So I get him out of the tank And then I get to work explaining to our boys what happened. There were a lot of tears from both, obviously. We did a little ceremony. We prayed over Yoshi, and then we ceremoniously flushed him down the toilet. Now, my oldest, he is a very tender-hearted little dude. He is what I say is too pure for this world. He really, really struggled with this loss, as this was kind of his first experience with a direct loss. And he asked me to lay in bed with him. So of course I did. Now, there are two things that really stood out to me when we were laying in bed and we were just kind of talking and processing through. Number one, kiddos grieve so cleanly, and it is such a beautiful thing to watch. When I first started in social work, I worked in an outpatient oncology center, and we had kiddos, and those kiddos would be playing and then out of nowhere have a total breakdown, screaming, tears, let all of the feelings out. And then it was like a switch flipped and they would resume playing after a few minutes. It truly is a beautiful thing to witness someone responding so easily and readily to their body when it needs whatever it needs in that moment. And so he did a lot of that. Just like I describe in the clean versus dirty pain episode, which I think is like episode 8, clean pain, clean grief comes in waves. And that's exactly what was happening with my son. The second thing I noticed, which is why I'm telling you this story in the first place, is how our brains have a built-in negativity bias that comes into play even at 6 years of age. As we were laying there, it was in one of the moments in between the grief waves, he said the following statements to me. "Mommy, today was supposed to be such a great day. Why did he have to die? The whole day is ruined. Today was supposed to be special. It was such a fun day until now. This is the worst day. I wish Yoshi didn't die so it could still be a good day." Now, these are just a few of the things that he said until he finally relaxed into sleep. Now, you might be asking yourself why I told you this incredibly long story. Because what my snugglebug experienced and what we all experience was the brain's negativity bias. The brain's built-in negativity bias is our tendency to only register or overly identify negative stimuli more readily, but also to dwell or focus on those events more than positive ones. Have you ever felt like you had the most perfect morning? Woke up on time. If you planned to exercise, you did. It felt amazing. Shower was perfect. Hair and makeup were on point. Even your home-brewed coffee was everything you needed to fill up your soul. And then something happens, maybe an email from your boss. Maybe you're back to commuting to the office, which would probably be enough to piss me off. Maybe your coworker walked in with a raging case of the grumps and was snappy towards you. Maybe it's been a perfect day and then you were scrolling social media before bed and you see a birth or a pregnancy announcement. And then all of a sudden, you're telling yourself it's a shit day, or that you have a shit life, right? This is so common. You can kind of plug anything into these scenarios and it still works, and we still experience it on a regular basis. Maybe you're having a perfect day and you get a call from your clinic and there's a delay or an unexpected financial obligation or something. And then it's like the whole day is shot to hell, throwing the baby out with the bathwater sort of thing. We all do this, right? There's nothing wrong with any of us. This is a very normal human experience. But why? Our capacity to weigh negative inputs is so heavily based on our evolution, and for really good reason. It has kept us and continues to keep us out of harm's way. Our day-to-day survival relied on our ability to judge potential threats and to avoid danger. That's why we say that our primitive brain, the brain that drives all of our unconscious thinking, only lives to do 3 things. I call it the motivational triad: to seek pleasure, to avoid pain, and to be as efficient as possible. Our brains developed systems like this to make it unavoidable for us to not notice danger that could be ideally responded to very quickly. So just like my kiddo had, by all accounts of a 6-year-old, let alone a grown 37-year-old woman, he had a perfect day. And yet when faced with this very real loss of this little frog, his whole day in his brain was terrible. That is how the negativity bias works. I'm going to give you a few more examples of the negativity bias. So the first example was what we were just talking about, the negative stimuli. Those events that we largely interpret as negative, and therefore we often believe them to be the totality of our experience. Another example is how news coverage is predominantly negative. The media utilizes this built-in negativity bias to its advantage because the more negative the news, the more attention-grabbing the headline tends to be. That's why doom scrolling is a thing. Our brain wants those hits of outrage and negativity. It thinks it's doing something productive with it. I did this so much at the start of the pandemic, which I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, did. We would just scroll, and I would constantly refresh that Worldometer COVID case count like several times a day and just be in shock every time. This is part of the negativity bias. This is why sensationalism in media works so well. This is why we hear all of these extraordinary accounts of things, and then our brain extrapolates the data to make it like a universal truth, even though it's pretty segmented and kind of cherry-picked data. And finally, another example is how we tend to think about and remember negative events in our lives. Do you know that I still sometimes think about my 5th grade teacher who, in my mind, humiliated me in front of my entire class over a paper I wrote? Or the rejection I faced from my first love my sophomore year of high school? To this day, I am by all accounts a pretty well-adjusted 37-year-old woman in a thriving marriage, and I have considerable academic success after the 5th grade. And yet sometimes I'm sitting at my desk or walking down the street or, God forbid, trying to fall asleep at night, and a flashback like that will hit me. The other night, I woke up around 1 a.m., which isn't too uncommon for me. And as I laid in bed, I was hit with this flashback from the first few days after we found out our embryo transfer had failed. I remember it so vividly. That night I was laying on the couch because I didn't want my crying to wake up my husband. And I just kept crying and whispering, please come back. I remember as clearly as it happened yesterday. That's grief, and that's the negativity bias. Our brain is in near constant effort to avoid pain. We'll toss out these kind of shit sandwich of memories in an effort to remind us, hey, do you remember when we got rejected because we tried something? We should never try anything again. Or, hey, do you remember when we opened our hearts so wide to the possibility of love and future, and it was so spectacularly stomped on? Yeah, we should probably never do that again. Our brain wants to avoid pain, so it reminds us of the negative. Our brain doesn't want us to try anything new, because that's not efficient, so it reminds us of the negative. Our brain likes to seek comfort, so it wants us to stay on the couch watching Netflix and eating popcorn because it's way more pleasurable than, well, most things. Okay, so we've got this built-in negativity bias. It's evolutionary, it's part of us, it's not a problem, but what the hell do we do with it? Awareness. Self-awareness to what is happening inside of your brain during this time. And I cannot overstate this. Checking in with yourself frequently throughout the day can be one easy, nearly effortless way to create more self-awareness. One way to do that is a body scan. Start at the top of your head and slowly scan down through your body to your toes. If your mind starts to wander, it's not a problem. Just slowly move your attention back to your body. You can set an alarm on your phone for every couple of hours just to check in. And I'm not talking about 15, 20 minutes. Take 2 minutes to yourself to shut things down and reconnect. Journaling is another great way to create self-awareness. Just opening your brain up to what you're experiencing through the perspective of your own written words. Some people, experts, will say practice gratitudes. Write down 3 things that you're grateful for each day, whether in the morning, before bed, or both. It can be an amazing practice. It is something that I practice in my own self-coaching work as well. I will say that some of us might not be in a place where gratitude is an easy emotion for us to access. Maybe we're going through a really tough time, pain, grief, shame. Things like that can make finding, accessing, or expressing gratitude challenging. And we don't need anything else to beat the crap out of ourselves for. So let me share with you how I talked it over with my son the night of Yoshi's untimely death. I didn't want to force him to a silver lining. If you know me, I'm not about that. I think in many ways it diminishes the experiences that we have as humans. So I asked him to tell me about his day. List off the things that he remembers from the day. So he did. We talked about how he got to go to school and see his friends. When I came to hang out with him and we played games, buying new clothes, going out to lunch together, all the things that he remembered from the day. So I think we counted them up and he came up with 20 things as he was recounting them, and he started to smile. So then I told him, okay, bud, so we have these 20 amazing things. And then this one really, really hard thing. He said, yeah, really hard, emphasizing the really, as one does because he does come by that flair for the drama naturally. So I said, do you think it's possible that even with one really hard thing, it can still be a good day? And he thought for a second. He was very intentional about it. And he said, yeah, I guess it was a really great day and then a sad moment. And that's exactly what it is. Our brains don't have nuance. My 37-year-old brain, my 6-year-old son's brain, very little nuance. There's only black, white, yes, no, right, wrong. But that's not how the world works. There's a tremendous amount of nuance in the world. Allowing yourself the space, opportunity, and compassion to acknowledge, wow, that was a really crappy 15 minutes or hour or whatever, without letting your brain do its unconscious thing of making those 15 minutes, the hour, the 2 hours, or whatever mean the totality of what you are going through. That will offer you so much more peace. And that is what I want for you, my beautiful friend. Peace. So that is what I have for you this week. Until next time, have a beautiful week. And remember, you have got this. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.